Welcome. That's the signature clap that we clap in here on Pirate Life Radio. I just learned that today from Ryan, but it's a nice segue.
Yeah, it makes it easier to edit because I can see it. Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot for being here, Katie. And I'm interested in knowing everything. Like, how is it that you became you in this new kind of construct of email and social media and this whole world? Like, how did you find your place, and did you think when you were young that you would end up in this place like that? Like, what was it like growing up?
Never thought I would end up here. I was supposed to be poised for maybe a political career or law school, and I was that very driven type A person that did that. I got the grades, I went to college, and then realized I hated that. So I technically dropped out. One summer, I walked across the country from Los Angeles to DC. I walked.
I'd heard about this, but I thought maybe that's an urban myth.
Nope, it actually happened. It took 3 months.
And that's where you met your love.
Yes, exactly. So I decided to completely shift focus on life, and we got married and have since had 6 kids. But also through that, it turns out walking all night in the desert is not actually good for your adrenals. And that plus pregnancy turned into autoimmune disease for me.
You were pregnant at the time you were
No.
Okay.
I walked, and then that was stressful on my adrenals. Pregnancy was the straw that kind of broke the camel's back.
Right.
Yeah. And so all that hit and kind of went into my own world of research. My background was journalism in college. And so trying to figure out what was wrong with me. And you know that you hear that said that people go into psychiatry to figure out what's wrong with them.
Sure, yeah.
I went into health for the same reason.
The sickest people are social workers or whatever. Everybody's trying to heal themselves. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Everybody's on that journey. And realized as I was finding this stuff, it wasn't being talked about. And there were a lot of people going through the same thing. And so my default with journalism was to write. And it became my outlet. And then a community started forming. And I just realized there was such a need for this. And so many women especially were going through a similar thing. And so the community just grew up around it. And it's become now, I mean, it was a passion. It's always been my passion. And now it's also my job.
Right. The writing must have been a huge, like, to me, I find it nourishing, right?
Yes.
There's like a nutrition in that also, even if nobody reads it. There's something about, it's a weird thing to think about expelling ideas or giving birth to ideas out of your body, but like to keep them in it, kind of, there's a dis-ease that happens, like if they grow and they don't get expressed somehow. Did you find a lot of health in that expression?
Absolutely. Writing's always been my outlet since I was really little. And so it's always, but it's interesting because I got into this because I love writing and research and very introverted activities. I didn't ever intend to become the face of anything.
Right.
And so events like this, ironically, are really tough because as an introvert, I'm so tired by the end of the day.
Right. That's what I feel. I'm like, to go and be a host for 3 days straight or whatever. I mean, it's kind of, if you go to a convention or something, that's kind of what you're in for. And it can take a bit. Do you need a couple days on the tail end of this? What do you do when you go home at the end of the week?
It takes me a couple days to get fully back to normal, but I have 6 kids, so I don't get to take any days off at home.
What's your oldest? What's your youngest?
The youngest is 3 and the oldest is 12.
Okay. Well, that's tight, at least. I mean, it's like corrallable. You know, it's not like somebody's 16 yet or something.
I know we're about to enter the teenage years. We'll see how it goes.
Is that nerve-wracking?
Yes and no. I'm trying to avoid the whole stereotype that the teenage years have to be tough.
Right.
And our first is really responsible. He's going to break us in easy. We have a couple fireballs later down the line, but I think we'll be okay with him. And honestly, kids are the best teachers. So I'm excited for the lessons.
Yeah. Do you find that it's difficult for them navigating life right now in, you know, the social media world that is so present? Is that like, there are obstructions? Is it tough at school? Like, is it interfering? I mean, because for me personally, it's a huge distraction. And I can't imagine trying to attenuate all that.
Yeah, well, it's multi-layered. So we've kept them completely off social media. That was a decision I made at the very beginning. Knowing, I mean, as you probably get it as well, how harsh the online world can be.
Yeah.
And also, I didn't feel like it wasn't my place to decide if they should be on social media. I got to grow up in a childhood where my parents didn't post pictures of me on Facebook. It didn't exist. And I always thought, what if they hit teenage years and they never wanted to be on social media? You can't undo that.
Right.
So I wanted to respect their autonomy and to give them the choice to not be involved in the online world if they chose to, especially just realizing all that goes with it and being in this world myself. And we also try to really cultivate values that aren't just centered on technology. So I think technology is an amazing tool and we use it in school with them a lot, but we try to really make the focus time outdoors and other skills so that they're not just always on technology. So it hasn't been a distraction for them much.
That's great, man.
Yeah.
Where do you live?
In Florida.
What kind of population density in a city, or you got some room?
It's technically a city, but it's very small. The whole area is like 12,000 people.
Yeah, yeah.
So we moved back in time. It's like the 1950s.
It's kind of nice. I mean, I think that growing up, I've talked to people with kids and they're like, well, I don't want them to be behind technologically and stuff and all that. And I'm like, I feel like that stuff you can learn, but like to set character, there's so many muddy messages that are out there in the world that like every mind doesn't need to have that. You got to scrub that off at a certain point if it's not useful, and it can glom on to you in a way that's not desirable or helpful, or there's no benefit to. So, I don't know. I heard a story about Steve Jobs being interviewed, and they talked about the iPad coming out, and what do you think about the iPad? Oh my God, your daughter must be great at it, and he says, I wouldn't let a child use this. And they go, well, why wouldn't you? And he said, why would I take away the most imaginative, creative tool in the world, their mind, and put it in this little box? Like, this is finite, and your mind doesn't need to be. And I thought, man, for a guy at the front end of technology to already be curtailing his daughter's usage is important. There's an important lesson there, I think. And I think that the same thing about like Elon Musk. It just blows my mind. It blows my mind in the world that we live in. That there's going to be an Elon Musk, and then there's people that are fighting for the right to mine coal or whatever the thing is. It's like we're going to take prehistoric bones in one hand and then this guy's going to fly to Mars, or like that. All that exists at the same time is baffling to me. In the same country, even it's a trip.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think with parenting, it's interesting. People, like with business, for instance, we go into it with objectives and goals, and we have a very clear idea of where we're going. And I think sometimes with parenting, you're so busy in the day-to-day, you don't actually think through those long-term objectives of what do I want to impart on my kids before they leave. But like you said, we're becoming increasingly more reliant on technology, and we're increasingly being replaced by machines.
Right.
So we need to foster in our kids and ourselves the skills that make us valuable even in that kind of an economy. And that's things like you mentioned, creativity and critical thinking and kindness. Computers can't take over those things.
Right.
And so giving them the space to keep that and not outsource their brain to technology at a young age. Yeah.
I also wonder, I'm like, if we outsource everything like that and people talk about the obsolete human or whatever, at a certain point for a healthy society, you need people to be purposeful and useful and working. And I feel like there's a place in the future for people to kind of turn technology off in certain areas so that we can have a population that feels vital and whole instead of sick. Because I think without that, that's what happens, right? I think we try to use technology to get our comforts or to open up space for us, but it can open up so much space that you're lost now in the fray, and that uselessness. I've never been more kind of empty than feeling like that,
It's a false sense of community. We think we're so connected because of social media. Yeah. But if you look at the data, like having true actual relationships with people in your actual life, not online, it's one of the best things you can do overall for longevity, for health. It's more important than quitting smoking. It's twice as important as exercise. Like, we know the data on this.
Amazing.
But we're increasingly withdrawing from communities. We're isolated. We're on technology more, and we're missing this, like actual people, actual conversation. But we know how important it is.
Mm-hmm. And then nuance is lost. I mean, you can't. There's so much expression lost if you're going to just be typing. Like, you can't illustrate what you really mean or feel. I love this long form conversation kind of thing just for that purpose. And to speak to that, the most miserable I feel is when I go, I'm just going to stay in bed and not do anything. I'm just going to call off things and then I'm alone and I'm on the internet, and it's like, that's misery for me. If I don't discipline myself and direct it, it just is like, I'm choosing a noose to put around my neck, basically,
Yeah.
At what point did you think, so this blog, I'm going to go ahead and publish. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put this out, and I'm going to, garner, because like you kind of fall into businesses. You're like, I'm doing this thing, and then, this thing people are looking at, and now, well, should I do something with this thing? Like, what were those moments like for you?
Yeah, it was a slow road at first. It was completely an outlet. I thought of it as a journal, actually, quite a bit in the beginning. And then
was it weird? Like, I'm putting my heart out there to strangers that I don't even, or, like that kind of feeling like, am I burying myself too much? Because there's some self-consciousness to it, I would think.
There is, and there was a spectrum of it. In the beginning, I was much more vulnerable, I think, for a while because there was no community and I was it was a journal and I was talking to a wall. And then as it started growing, especially, I realized I was really starting to censor myself and to build a wall and put on armor because the online world can be very, very harsh. And so I've actually been making a really conscious effort to get back to being really real and vulnerable because I think that's another thing the world needs right now is that like
And you've walked a road to have strength with it. I think that, you come past that and you've got some experience to share. I feel like it's our duty.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny because like I said, I never thought of it as a business. And my husband was in the SEO business actually. And so he was using my blog as a test ground for his actual paying clients.
Wow.
Yeah. And it started working really well. And in the beginning of our marriage, finances were really tight.
Yep.
And I was balancing the checkbook one month and couldn't figure out there was extra money that had come into our bank account from Amazon. I'm like, Amazon doesn't pay anybody money. Why do we have?
Right.
And it was affiliate commissions from linking to things on Amazon that I had forgotten I had done. And I realized for the first time, this can actually be a sustainable business model as well. But for me, the focus has always been the community and the mission as well. There's a lot I could do that would make a lot more money.
Sure.
But yeah, the mission is what keeps me up at night and wakes me up in the morning.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing, that whole thing about vulnerability and what to share and what to expose and all that. And I don't know. I think I really feel it's different being a woman than a guy. When people say vile things to me, it's like, you're not really going to do anything to me on my way to my car or whatever. Like I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not, it's just not that way, but it's like, relatives and stuff like that. You think of that and people, it can be a horrific thing. And at the end of the day, I just feel like the truth has got to win out. I've got to speak this or else it creates cancer inside me. Yeah. And I need to be unafraid and unashamed as I go forward. And it's like if I demand to walk like that in the skin world, maybe it's important that I do that everywhere because this weird thing is happening where I see with friends and like there's an online personality and then there's John and those are different guys or whatever. And it's like that thing, not that somebody contrives to do that, but some do, I'm sure, but like you can get lost inside it's like a black magic that happens online and you can easily get lost in the fray. And I think that staying attuned to what you feel is authentic, I think it seems like the only safety there is, like vulnerability is the right, stronger way, even if it seems like you're letting yourself be opened up more or something like that. I think it's an important aspect. I've got a friend that just wrote a book about following your dreams and about how important it is to do that it is the right and almost easier thing than trying to play it safe. And the book's called Going Right. I got to give you a copy, but it's a fantastic discussion in really being brave and showing up for yourself. You want to know how to be useful. It's like it's right in front of you, and in front of all of us and that usefulness.
Yeah. And I think you have to develop skills to cope with that, especially when you're in a public facing role. And so for me, realizing, first of all, there are people whose opinions I certainly care about a lot. And like Brene Brown recommended this, like actually make a shit list of people you give a shit about. Mm. And if they're not on that list, don't take other people's opinions too seriously. Mm. But I think there's also a really interesting ego part that I've worked through a little bit the last couple of years, realizing before I get defensive, because anything that like a negative comments, they bring up all these, your ego engages.
And my 6-year-old comes out and
exactly.
I want all of it.
Exactly. You want to have a temper tantrum, but asking first, is there an element of truth in this? Could I take this as constructive criticism, even if it's meant as actual criticism? So before I defend myself, is there a chance this person's right to begin with? Because you can always improve. I feel like you can learn something from anybody, any situation, but also just developing the skills to not take those things too personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so important. And a friend of mine always says, remember from whence it comes. Like, remember the source. Consider the source before you go and attach an emotion to whatever it is that you've heard, and I think that's so goddamn important. And I got told that recently while I'm going, look at this, there can be 480 nice things that people say and then one thing, and I'm like, I'm going to answer that guy. And I'm like, don't attach the negative, Tait. Right. That's the one you don't need to address.
And not only that, you're going to ruminate on it all day. Like you could get all those positive comments and you're like, oh, great. But that one negative one is impossible to get out of your head. It sticks.
What's nice is like that sticking point for me now is like, if I feel like I've brushed up against somebody in a way that it's rough or something, or I haven't left it in the way that I'd like, That's the part that sticks now. And I'm like, you got to get right with that. It's just like, how do I right this ship that I'm in charge of instead of all these opinions, and make sure that I can live with how I am at night? Because that's, at the end of the day, that's the judge. That's the one that either keeps you going or not, in a land of horrible depression.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What have you done? What's the number one thing that you've done for your health? Do you think the number one easy fix you could give people?
Oh, okay. So there's a couple. I would say, especially places like this, everyone's so enthralled by all these really high tech gadgets that like hone that 1% of perfection.
And also come and go. I don't know that,
Right.
Okay.
Right. But to go back to like the easy free things, like spend more time outside in the sun, on the ground, spend more time with actual people. Like seriously, the data suggests that that's the best thing you can do for your health and longevity. So develop actual relationships and make that a priority. Build a community if you don't have one. Spend time every week with people, being vulnerable, having actual conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think start with the basics like that, and then you can add on all those things that are going to help you, create that perfect 1% at the end. But
yeah, that mind, to get that. I remember I went away. I was on a job for a long, long time, and I was feeling beaten down. Not enough, like all the metrics were off for me, diet and sleep and everything, and I was tired. It had been like 3 months since I'd seen one of my buddies, and he was like, "Oh man, you got to come to this thing and be such an addition." And I was like, "Man, I'm just not feeling that way at all. I don't think that I'm that person at all that you're seeing." And I was just like really in a hole about it. And he says, "Oh man," he says, "you just got to come around, Tait, and we got to remind you." And it's like, it is like that. We get a reflection of who we are from the folks that are around us in a lot of regard. And if you get away from that, you can start to get led in directions that aren't maybe useful or helpful. And it's so nice, man. It's the biggest benefit. And that's what I love the most about this, is like being in the conversation of health, fitness, nutrition, and not that, because that's like the buy-in point. It's like the overarching point is a holistic community that can actually grow and sustain and has, value, so that can go on and feed children and make sure their minds are trained in a way that they can be useful and helpful and so on. And it seems like at certain points where I go, oh, we're going backwards from that so much. And then as soon as I started like really looking into, and it was really due to Mark Sisson, I think, in my like looking into this way, is like, man, there's a whole conversation happening. And then after I went to Expo West one year, and I thought, Walmart and everybody's interested in health now. And I was like, that's the public pushing back in a strong enough way that it's going to make a change in the world. And then even people that don't want it are going to get it residually because enough people are asking, which is really fantastic. I mean, I feel like what a great time to be alive, when at the same time I'm like, are we headed towards a brick wall right now at high speed? But I'm like, maybe we'll be okay too. Yeah. What do you see in the future for technology? Do you think that humans just become sedentary, and what do you think happens with all this?
I think
because this is changing at a rate we can't keep up with biologically even.
Absolutely. I think it's hard to even predict. Like my job didn't exist when I was a kid. There was no such thing as a blogger. There was no podcaster.
I know thought up their job. Everybody I know.
None of us could have been employed 20 years ago in this job. No. So I think we even can anticipate fully what the challenges will be. I'm not of the mindset that technology can ever fully replace a lot of the things humans do. Like I said, I think we need to.
Nor is it useful. Nor do I have a desire for it. A driverless car? No, man. I like my truck. Or what? I mean. There are these things where it's like, you can do it, but ought you?
Yeah, I think it's really a big question of our time. And it's one of those things we need to address sooner than later. And like, to your point, I think it's going to take a very conscious movement to actually resist overuse of technology.
Right.
Because it is changing our brains. We know that. Statistically, our brains are changing to adapt to being on our phones too much. And our posture is changing, adapting to being on our phone too much. So it's something I'm really cognizant of with my kids. And I'm seeing it in the younger generations. They're actually resisting it somewhat. So I'm hoping maybe they're actually seeing our overuse and they're becoming more conscious about it. But it's truly the question that this generation is going to have to answer.
I love that you have the litmus test of your children right in your own house. It's like, oh, what do you guys up to? Because I see a 13-year-old. I'm like, so what's going on the internet? How are you guys doing? Are your friends good? Are you outside enough? Are you bitching? Are you mad? Do you feel like you're owned by the phone? Like what? Like there's all of that all around. We're in a slavery kind. And then the phone started doing the dirty trick a few months ago and goes, you've been on 5 hours and 23 minutes of screen time this week. And I read it with an evil laugh, like, ha ha, I got you, sucker. Like as if my phone is an entity. I'm like, I just got to put this away for a while. Like that is not a metric I want to have rise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I feel like we're like in between cyborg and human in a way. And then I feel like if you're born after the internet, you're maybe full cyborg at a certain, like, it's like, how would you even, I mean, yeah, the business I did when I first started in 2000, I guess, I started a business of my own, a roofing company and construction company. And I thought without a cell phone, this would retard my progress by, I don't know, a factor of 10, maybe. It would be huge. Like I can be on the phone doing jobs on the car on the way to the, and to have a beeper or something and go, it's like you can't live that way. But at the same time, they're sure. Now that I look back at it, I'm like, those were easier times when I was only Snake on my phone that I was playing, and it was different.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we just have to be really conscious of that, especially that next generation. It's going to be really important.
Yeah. Do they address it in schools?
I think it varies by school. So we homeschool and we have tutors that help with our kids.
Yep.
We've taken a very intentionally alternative approach with them because, like I said, I think
because you saw the drawbacks, or
yeah, well, also we travel a lot, and so it was important to us to be able to take the kids with us. But I just think a lot of the things they do in school actually diminish those skills that are going to become most important, like creativity and critical thinking. I don't think humans were meant to sit in a box 8 hours a day, and certainly not little ones. And so we wanted to kind of recreate that environment. So for instance, there's no chairs in our schoolroom. They have yoga swings and trampolines and surf trainers and all that. So they're moving a lot.
Amazing.
And then we're trying to teach, I basically 80-20 the education system, figured out what are the actual skills they need to function from that educational standpoint that they're going to test for. So we optimized for those, but then we also purposely optimized for boredom and for time outside. Like I wanted to create those opportunities for them to develop the skills they're going to need.
You designed a schoolhouse in a way for your children in this way.
Yeah, it's an alternative approach to education, basically, and focused on our values. Like entrepreneurship is a tremendous core value for us, and so I didn't want them to be in school all day, being trained to do a job that they were going to sit at a desk all day. So they are actually finishing up with coursework for high school at about 13 or 14, and then we've created an entrepreneur incubator. So when they're in high school, I think one of the things we want to impart is like a high tolerance of failure, because especially in the entrepreneur world, you have to fail a lot before you succeed oftentimes. So when they're in high school, before they can drive or have a cell phone, they have to have a profitable business for a year, and they have to come to us with a business plan, and we'll invest in them, but we'll teach them as we go. Because I think entrepreneurship teaches you trial by fire. You learn all those skills as you go. And so we've developed a system around that, hoping that they'll then become contributing members of society that really help.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Is it only your children that are involved?
In our homeschool, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's kind of
spreading. You ever think about making like a little Montessori school, or that's the wrong word for it, but I mean, this seems like a great opportunity of an overhauling of a system that you've really put yourself into.
Yeah, I'd love eventually to actually delve into the educational space somewhat, or create a homeschool curriculum or whatever that would help other parents do this. I want to make sure we get a couple through it and make sure it actually works like we hope it will first. But
you guys need to win, okay, team? Yeah.
Yeah, but just like instead of just taking the normal approach, like I said with parenting, think what are the actual long-term objectives and what are the skills they need to get there, like that pattern recognition and creativity and those things. And you have so much more time to do that when they're not sitting in school 8 hours a day.
And I think too, it's like whatever, I don't know what, I mean, I haven't been in a schoolroom in a long time, but I wonder scholastically, it's like the world changes so rapidly. It's like, talking to somebody in the medical system that's still in med school, they're like, dude, the stuff that I study on my own is so beyond what is going on. They're 15 years behind in what they're teaching doctors or whatever. And that comes up everywhere. I mean, that's not a slam on the system. It's just that technology is moving so quickly and we have new accomplishments and endeavoring into new fields at such a great rate that you can't keep up with books. And so, you really need to stay ahead of the game and go, okay, what systems are working now in the world? Because in 1995, these weren't systems that are working. That was an old model. The whole model is kind of, I don't know that it's worthless anymore. I'm sure you can find places, but it's like, it's really antiquated.
Yeah, and that's the good side of technology. I don't want to just, harp on the bad. We now all have access to what doctors used to learn in medical school, and we can all have access to the latest medical information, which I think is also, it gives us a tremendous responsibility because we can no longer outsource our health to a doctor. We have the ability and the technology to learn on our own, and we should. Mm-hmm. And I think like the medical world's going to have to adapt to that new changing technology, but it's also beautiful because I think there's such a personalized aspect to health. It's hard at conferences like these sometimes because everybody has their approach. And I think at the end of the day, they all figured out the perfect thing for them. And we can all, like I said, learn something from everybody, but that doesn't mean their prescriptive approach is going to work for you. And so being able to take technology and personalize your own health, personalize education, that's the blessing of it. And we have not just an ability, but a responsibility to do that now.
I really think it's such an exciting and important responsibility to take upon yourself, because otherwise you're just left in the fray of like, how is this advertising that somebody, I mean, you're being led and taught by corporations that are trying to sell things. That's kind of the gist of it in a way now. And I think to combat that, the only way is to go, here's how the whole thing works. It's not a mystery. And here's the important things to look at. And there's a lot of distractions. Know that,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. How long do you think that it'll take to overhaul the whole system?
Educational or health?
Education.
I think we could do it easily within one generation, or
Really?
certainly, if we're cognizant about it. I think this is another area, like the technology is exploding, the space area. Like people are so in the gut. People have all these pet topics.
Right.
I hope that education is going to become one of the next ones we disrupt.
Me too.
Because truly, like, we need those minds working in that way.
In a heightened respect. I mean, my friend John Wellborn, he's got he had these twins, and when they were born, he said, the first time they started eating real food, it was liver and sweet potatoes, and that's just the way we do. And I think, man, what an opportunity if you started eating like that instead of the 15,000 Big Macs that I ate or whatever. It's like, I wonder what does that result in? But I feel like we're moving more towards those ends too. I always like to remember too, when you're talking about all the experts like around this weekend, that it's like it's working for them right now in this space and time, and we don't know. I mean, it's like this weird thing where we're all in this beta test and we all think it's the best idea, but in 4 years it might turn out to be like, oh, that was not the right turn. It may be a Betamax tape at that time, or that kind of thing. Like there's a class action lawsuit on the brand new best thing that happens all the time. And so that whole thing about like not just being able to overlay on people, it's like time and space matters and changes too. It's a weird, but it's cool because we have this litmus test of all these people. There's all these people that are volunteering to be like, yeah, man, I'll eat nothing but meat for a month. What's going on?
Let's see what happens.
And we'll just, I mean, I love the Ben Greenfields of the world. That's like, yeah, man, I'll do whatever. Like, what do you got? Are we going to stab my toenails with whatever? And is that going to, I mean, the whole thing is amazing. This is amazing experiments happening.
Yeah.
Have you ever gone into the stem cells or anything like that?
A little bit. I've only done once for my own body. I have some hesitation on stem cells from anyone else because I don't think we fully can test or know. And as someone with autoimmune disease, I'm just hesitant to take tissue from anyone else. But I've done PRP and stem cells from my own blood.
Yeah, I've done the PRP a bunch, and I guess, it's just kind of, it's growing along like, how do you stitch this old injury together? Here's the new stuff right now. And that carries me through for a little while, but I was become really interested in the IV stem cells. And Ben talks about the stuff coming from your bone marrow, which seems horrifically uncomfortable to me.
Well, this is cool. So if you ever have kids, there's the periodontal ligament in the mouth is actually a really rich source of stem cells, and that lasts well into adulthood. So they can do cool stuff by stimulating that in the mouth. But when your kids lose a molar, for instance, if you bank it correctly, they can replicate those stem cells, and the technology is getting better and better so that one day they'll have probably unlimited IVs of their own stem cells that they can use later in life, or if there's an injury. So cool stuff like that. I'm like, technology is amazing. I can do that for my kids. Yeah.
That's way better than thinking, I'm going to freeze myself and we'll see if they work it out in 50 years.
Right.
Like, sorry, Walt Disney, that's a horrible idea.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Can you imagine? It's like being a superhero again. I mean, it's like, I was talking to some kids and I was like, I never felt really old until I thought, oh, I get it what they meant when they said youth is wasted on the young.
Yes.
However, if you got vials of stem cells, man, it is on. You're good.
Yeah, but I think that'll be another question that potentially gets answered in our generation is, if you had the ability to live forever, does that change your actual perception and experience of life? Because it's the finality of life that makes it, I mean, you're only here for a short amount of time,
right.
So you have to make it count. And they're saying we're close to that pivot point where for each additional year you live, they'll be able to extend life even longer. But it's like, I travel with a coin that says memento mori, remember that you die. Does the experience of life change?
Where'd you get that?
Ryan Holiday.
Okay.
Yeah. He wrote The Daily Stoic.
Yeah. My friend does a similar thing. He has the Sisu Way podcast, and he's a similar thinker in that way. But yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I like that a lot. Where can people find you?
I'm pretty much Wellness Mama everywhere. So wellnessmama.com. I have
Okay.
a podcast as well, Wellness Mama podcast, and all the social media.
Right on. Right on. Well, thanks. I know you're busy and you got a lot of people to see and maybe a nap to take. Who knows?
Hopefully. I know, isn't it funny? We come to these health conferences and we do all the unhealthy things. We walk around on concrete. We don't
All the
sleep.
stuff we don't tell people to do.
Under artificial light, we drink all night. It's terrible. Yeah.
Yep. Here's the way to that's what I feel like I'm at right now. Like my whole previous life as an athlete, I'm like, now I'm unwinding all the habits that I had that were necessitated by my sport kind of thing. And that's what I guess the next part of my life is. Well, anyway, it's been a pleasure and thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right.